look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Content is king. So if you have some content you need created, hit up iopvideo.com. Video production, podcasting, you name it, we can do it. iopvideo.com. We make things look pretty.
Welcome to the Voice Party. We got a very special guest this week, the one and only Gasper Bernal. Gasper, introduce yourself to the viewers.
Hey, I'm Gaspar. I'm actually one of the hosts of this show.
How are you?
Oh, motherfucker, so it feels like you're a guest.
I know. I'm a shitty person. Okay, so yeah, let's start with what do we think?
Wait. Let her know what we're reviewing first of all.
All right. Can you do that? You're better than me at it.
Well, okay. So we are reviewing. It's a documentary on Netflix.
More like analyzing. We're analyzing.
We're analyzing a documentary on. It's available on YouTube called Manufacturing Consent.
That's free.
That's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. I saw it's a Noam Chomsky. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky. This is how the people describe him, one of the most important minds in our generation, but it's a shame that he's well known as much as he should be. I particularly some of my favorite. Okay, I'm gonna just little background on something. I was a huge Race Against the Machine fan, huge Bill Hicks comedian fan, and a lot of those people, he was like their biggest influence, Noam Chomsky. Like, if you can see it through their art. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that. I just wanted to say that.
Oh yeah. Actually, yeah. I had asked you what did you know? Because before, not too long ago, I didn't know a whole lot about Noam Chomsky. My brother, he went through this whole kind of intellectual awakening, if you will, when he started college. And Noam Chomsky was one of the guys that he was learning about. And I remember, we would come home late from school at 11 at night, and he wanted to talk to me about these things. And there was a bunch of other guys like Massimo Pigliucci and a bunch of other smart people. And he wanted to talk to me about it. Yeah. He wanted to talk to me about it, and I was like, I don't want to hear it. It's 11:30 at night. I want to go to sleep. I'm tired of being in school all day, And so I kind of just ignored him. And very recently, within the last maybe year and a half, I kind of rediscovered him. And actually, there goes fucking. Okay. I was curious, what does manufacturing consent mean to you guys? Can you give it a definition?
Well, consent. Okay. So manufacturing consent. It's like, creating this whole idea that we have a choice, choices. I mean, based on what the film is about, and because when I first saw the name, I thought, I didn't know we were doing something on Noam Chomsky. I thought it was something to do with the Me Too movement or something, with guys prey on drunk women, something like the manufacturing consent. I thought, that's what I thought. So once I actually watched the film, and I see that that's not the original idea for his book, because that was the name of his book, something else. I forgot what that was now, but they talked about that in the film. It's basically. It talked about the trickery that the media uses to kind of make us feel we're free. Yeah. We're free to choose. I mean, of course, the film is based around the media and the way the media operates, but it's bigger than that, because you can only act in the realm of what you know. Yeah. And if they minimize that, then there's no fucking, especially here in America, we see ourselves the way that TV portrays ourselves, and when you do that, it's kind of dangerous, because
we see ourselves as free, as middle class, as freedom
fighters.
Yeah.
And as far as war goes, I mean, there's a lot more to that, but we see ourselves as like
Needs
the
30
underdog
seconds. It already.
for the little man when to the rest
Hey
of the
guys,
world.
I have returned. I don't know why I got kicked off, but that's okay. It gave me time to usher Grandma back in.
Okay. Can you hear us fine?
Can you
Can you
hear
hear
us?
us fine, Joaquin?
Anyway,
Joaquin, can you hear us? Okay.
dang it, still audio problems, huh?
Yeah. So just to quote Bill Hicks one more time, it's if you think you're free, try going anywhere without money. You know.
Right.
Anyways, but that's what I think of the title after watching the film.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically how this whole idea of what we are is, it's what we are to ourselves and what we are to the rest of the world. And to the rest of the world, we're fucking bullies. Not only are we bullies, but we help little countries bully themselves, and whatever it, as far as news goes, we're especially in today's world where it seems like we're getting a lot of news.
Right.
Okay, just quick question: what year was this made?
1990, I think, or 1989, something like that.
That's before.
I was going to say I thought it was in the 80s when this thing was made.
So I
It seemed like it.
Yeah, it's something like 88, 89. The book comes out in 88, I think, or 89.
Yeah,
and the film
was
comes out
90s.
right after that.
Yeah, it was definitely 90s because I think they were. This was like during Bush's campaign, Daddy Bush, not fucking cocaine Bush.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's
Bush Senior. Yeah.
Yeah. So Joaquin, what anything to add on what manufacturing consent might mean?
You mean the definition or the film itself, like the definition of the title?
I kind of want to start on what the definition is. Yeah. Yes, and basically.
Well, I think that manufacture, the first thing I hear is that something is artificial.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that we think, because the overall thesis of the film, because I think the title is the thesis. The thesis is essentially that we believe that we are not being controlled. We think we have these freedoms, but in actuality we don't. And I think that's what manufacturing and manufacturing mean is deliberately being presented to us that we're free. It's not just the fact that we think we're free, but the idea that this feeling of consent, this idea that I am allowing this to happen, is a manipulation from an outside force.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is constructed like a Lego set, but not something that is authentic or natural. So that seems to be what the title means. Yeah.
So in the other video that I shared with you guys, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it. It says how there were these basically 5 pillars of it, right? And one of them is media ownership. And so in order for this to work, the media needs to be owned by a very narrow group, which it's no secret to us. We know that the media is owned by a very narrow group, that narrow group being, rich people. And so I think I might have said this in a previous episode, but I'm going to go ahead and repeat it. So these are the major news outlets, right? You have CNN, which is owned by AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Washington Post, which is owned by Amazon. You have NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, which is owned by Comcast. You have ABC, owned by Disney. You have CBS, owned by Viacom CBS. And you have Fox News, owned by Fox Corporation. Since we tend to focus on cinema a lot, I also want to talk about the major movie industries. You have Warner Brothers, which is owned by...
Wait.
Wait.
Before you get done with your list, I didn't hear the New York Times in that assessment of important news, news media. Are they no longer? I thought they were still sort of like
they're like the most
the
powerful.
overarching like newspaper. You know what I mean?
You're right. You're absolutely right. I started following news very recently, so like my understanding of the news media is still kind of limited. I do know that the New York Times owns itself, as far as I understand.
Right.
You could say they're an independent.
Yeah.
But they're also huge, which
Yeah.
kind of defeats the purpose, right?
And probably the most important newspaper company or whatever news company ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hands down.
Yeah. Okay, so cinema, so movie companies are Warner Brothers, owned by Warner. Yeah, Universal Pictures, owned by Comcast. Paramount, owned by Viacom CBS. 20th Century Studios, owned by Disney. Disney, owned by Disney, which owns Pixar, Marvel, LucasArts, and I might be forgetting some other ones. I think Fox. Yeah.
Fox. Yeah.
Fox is owned by Disney.
Everything but the sports they own on Fox now.
Okay, yeah. Columbia Pictures, owned by Sony. MGM, owned by MGM, and then you have Sony Pictures. So you know, some of the same conglomerates that own the news media own the movie companies. And then the other one was it talks a little. I'm just going to gloss over this. It talks, that advertising is really what's most important. That what the media needs to do is get our attention to then sell us stuff, and it needs to get us. Basically, it sells us to these corporations to be able to advertise to us. It talks about how, if you don't fit in the constraints of the media elite, you kind of get you get how do we say it, like you get ostracized.
Can I say something about that though? Because I believe that this thing missed out on a huge important point.
Mm-hmm.
It talked about the media, but one of the biggest things now is social media.
Right.
Like, man, that has probably just as much influence as everything you just mentioned.
More importantly,
well, keep in mind the documentary and
I'm
the
not
book
talking
were
about the
written
documentary.
way before social media came out.
I'm not talking about the documentary. I'm talking about that thing he showed us. But yeah, right. That's crazy because imagine what this documentary would be like in today's. And Noam Chomsky's still alive.
Yeah. And he still talks about this stuff.
I think it's gotten worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was listening to a recent interview, and he's talking about how it's frustrating because he keeps seeing the same thing over and over and over and over. So there's this term called the Big Five, I think, which includes there's actually a hearing right now to because of how monopolized, how much of a monopoly these internet companies have made. Amazon, Apple, what's the other one? Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. They're basically they're being they're facing antitrust right now. I was listening to some of it, but it's like a 6-hour hearing, and I think Microsoft, which is the other one, went through it in the 90s, right? It got broken up because of how big it had gotten.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, they're there too.
Which I believe they like helped Apple because of that. Because if they wouldn't have helped Apple, they would have been even bigger. So they helped Apple to kind of create competition.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that these companies do is they merge, and then things get worse. Yeah.
Again, that's why I believe in like the importance of little guys like the Young Turks, even crazy ass fucking. Even though I don't believe like Infowars, like I'm glad they're there because there's other good ones like that are there's the importance of little whatever news and journalism, like independent journalism is like, especially with the internet, man. Yeah, that's fucking.
And to a degree, us.
Yeah, this is journalism.
If we want to be ambitious.
Yeah. Because one of the things some of the things that are happening are that like you have the whole echo chamber, phenomenon where like if the New York Times says something, everybody else has to say the same thing. And the other problem is that you have a lot of fake news, which is pretty much drowning out the real stuff, really. So then you have the whole like discrediting of alternative outlets, And then one of the things that impressed me the most was you have the common enemy, right? That was the fifth pillar, where it's like you have all these outlets that basically create the same thing to hate, and we know what those are. At the time when the book came out, it was communism, and then more recently terrorism, and right now immigrants. It's been forever, but and you can pretty much expect that the whole country has an opinion on these things, and it's not just the U.S. Other countries are anti-immigrant as well, so it's a tactic that works. Right. So we know that another thing. Okay. Any more thoughts on that?
Well, when you talk about the common enemy, it's crazy because, like, if you look at every movie that gets made, like a lot of the movies in the 80s, the common enemy for a lot of the shit, like they're Russians. The Russians, right. Or in video games, the Russians the main villain, right. Or there's now is the North Korean thing,
Right.
And I think me and Joaquin actually watches this documentary about horror movies. I mean, remember that one, Joaquin?
He just dropped out.
Okay. Well, we're watching this documentary on horror films, and how horror films kind of always tap into. So it was a bunch of different. It's called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue. I highly recommend it. It's a documentary about. They interview a lot of famous horror directors, from like George A. Romero to John Carpenter, Wes Craven, a lot of them. I can't even, Anyways, the main thing is they all shared was they all look at what's the current state of the country, and whatever the fear the enemy is, then they build around that to focus on their villain. Which that's done not just in horror. That's done in everything.
Pretty much. What I've noticed is that pretty much everything that's not a human is either like, for example, I heard somewhere that the orcs from
I think
did we that they represented immigrants.
Well, the orcs. Well, what's crazy is the big ones, the Uruk-hai in Lord of the Rings. They had like dreads, and it's like there was no other colored people in the movie. Yeah.
Well, the Easterlings in Return of the King, some of the Easterlings look like they might have been people of
Persians. Color. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And then what were the wicked men? It's like, what the fuck?
No, sorry.
I mean,
what I
that.
Heard, go ahead.
It's funny because there's there's this stigma of the way the races are treated in the books. I mean, the orcs, the Uruk-hai, are not actually that well detailed and described as far as like their hair having dreadlocks. I think it's an interesting, to say the least, it's an interesting choice that Peter Jackson chose to represent them as dreadlocked monsters in particular.
Yeah, that motherfucker.
But this sort of thing has spilled over. This sort of thing has spilled over even into D&D recently. Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, the company that owns the TSR, has come out and said that they were going to redraft a lot of the racial alignments, because there's this whole thing where it's like, well, orcs in D&D are like traditionally evil, and then there's a race of like elves called the Drow. And the thing about these characters, these races, is that they are usually depicted as having like darker skin, right? Than like the regular elves are pretty much white, and then like the Drow are all like sort of purplish or dark. And I get D&D's like, all right, we don't want anyone to think that we're saying that people of color are evil inherently. But I mean, these are fantasy characters,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, in particular, at least in the novels, there weren't the African people of African descent at the time that Tolkien was writing. They weren't really, the population wasn't that high in Britain, A and B. It just, you know what I mean? I focusing on the movie, like I definitely looked at that and was like, what are you trying to say, Peter Jackson?
Yeah.
What are you trying to? I mean, I love the movies, but still.
Yeah, that for example got me. Have you seen? I mean, I know it wasn't very well reviewed by a lot of people, but that one film with Will Smith where he plays.
Oh, Bright.
Yeah, what did you think about that? Because I like the way the orcs were like they kind of played it into the modern world.
Honestly,
I mean, the
ever
movie
since
itself, I didn't like the movie itself, to be honest, but the whole story, the way the story was kind of cool. Because I mean, we're getting out of topic a little bit.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's okay. I will say this much. I stopped seeing Will Smith movies after I saw After Earth, which was
with
M. Night Shyamalan's big return.
That was with his son, right?
Yeah, that was with his son.
Yeah.
And it was so not good that I just said, you know what, unless it's a Men in Black rehash, I don't need to see Will. I was done.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
no more Ali performances in him.
Yeah.
He's just in it for the check now.
I agree.
So I'm gonna read a quote from the movie. Investment, production, and distribution is controlled by a concentrated network of corporations, conglomerates, and investment firms. They staff the government and own the media. The control over resources and the need to satisfy their interest imposes very sharp constraints in the political system and the ideological system. So, a lot of for the Democratic primaries, right? I kept seeing these memes that said like anybody but Trump, except Biden, right? You guys remember seeing a lot of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then who wins, right? Biden.
Yeah.
And I remember the same thing happened with Bush. The second time Bush Jr. ran, California is a bubble, and I was very young at the time, but like it seemed like anybody but Bush. It doesn't matter who runs up against Bush, anybody. And then you get John Kerry, and if you guys remember, he seems like somebody who's super out of touch, and you're like, are they trying to win? Like, what the hell? And right now, any day now, Biden is supposed to announce his vice president. And I think to any of us, it's pretty obvious that, there's a few choices that if he makes, I think, even skeptics might get behind Biden. He already said it would be a woman, but you heard the names, Warren,
Kamala Harris.
Well, initially, it was like pick Warren. It's like, okay, yeah, that would make sense.
Someone with good smelling hair.
With good smelling hair. My thought way back then was like, if he just taps Bernie, like you get all the Bernie voters automatically. I'm not that familiar with Warren, but my understanding is that she's very much establishment, right? She was right.
Yeah.
And so my guess is that whoever he picks for his vice president, most of us are probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah. I want to take it back to what there was this comedian who I follow. I believe it was someone, I forgot his name. Anyways, he did this post that's like, Donald Trump is an overweight man, older. What is he, like in his 70s?
Yeah,
he's an overweight 70-something-year-old man who eats McDonald's every day. And then Joe Biden is a guy whose brains are basically scrambled eggs at this point. He's like, never has there been a better time to be a vice president.
and so and so there were a couple other people that ran for president, right?
You could easily throw one of those for Biden. That's where the deal that's where you either make it or break it with like either I win their vote based on this choice or I lose it because that's what's holding a lot of people back at this point.
Yeah,
because nobody wants Biden.
Right.
Somebody said to me, a lot of people will not want to vote for Biden because, for lack of it, like, because it seems like his brains are scrambled. But my friend turned around and said, "Well, look, I would rather have somebody in office who clearly knows what the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all the amendments say, even though he has trouble communicating it and actually tries to live by it or professionally exude that, versus someone who A, doesn't know what it says, and B, isn't bothering to try." Because Biden's like, we can't do that because the thing in the document, the thing I'm talking about, we can't do that because of that. And Trump will be like, who cares what it says? I think it's a great idea if we violate this. Like,
Yeah, pretty much putting the pattern.
I'd rather have the dude that's struggling to do the right thing versus the dude that shrugs his shoulders and goes, whatever,
Hey, let's press all these buttons to see what happens.
Yes.
So there was a couple of other guys, right? You have Al Gore and you have Mitt Romney. And
you talking about the first time or the second time?
Well, just people that have ran for president, right?
Okay.
And for the most part, they all sound pretty similar. Like, they were all rich people. They were all backed by rich people. They, they were all like, none of them were saying, "Hey, let's get out of the Middle East." None of them were saying, "Let's get out of Latin America." They were.
Can I say something just to add on that? Not to sound cynical, they never fucking talk about that, dude. They never do. Sensationalized. Like, if you look at for example, the debate with Trump and Hillary versus the debate with the other two parties that one time, that during that last election, the one that nobody was watching, we're actually talking about solutions that sounded, what's the word? Logical, and these fucking idiots were talking about bullshit, man. It was like watching a fucking Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Who Wants to Be a Billionaire show.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that there are, like, okay, I know that when Obama was running, he had said he had a plan to bring the troops home in phases, right? He didn't want to pull everybody out at once, but he was like, it's gonna be like a drip effect. And I think when Trump was running, I think he said he was going to, I'm now, don't quote me, I could be wrong, but I seem to remember him saying at some point in one of his speeches when he was running that he had planned on bringing troops home as well. The problem with this is that Trump has been noted to say things in his appeals and speeches to people and then turn around and say the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. So he might have said it. That doesn't mean that it's stuck. Yeah. But I agree. But you know what? Also, one reason why, like, many candidates won't even address it, won't even promise you anything, is because these companies, the ones that have vested oil interests overseas and need those to be tended to, or other business ventures over in Central and South America that need holdings, I mean, they back a lot of these candidates, which is, I know, is the point we're getting to when we talk about the rich and the wealthy and the out of touch. And it's not within the candidate's best interest to actually do anything until possibly their last term in office.
But they don't. They don't, even in their last term. They don't.
Because and the frightening thing here is, like, if you did, you probably would be, blacklisted or maybe, and I hate to say it, but maybe they're being paid under the table by some of these, like, major companies to keep their mouths shut and not do the right thing. You know what I mean? Like, in regards to the international stuff.
Yeah.
And the perfect. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, now I don't know about you guys, but I felt like, maybe this is diving too far ahead, but Noam Chomsky seems to do a great job of breaking down, like, the system of elites and powers that be. But I don't think, because I spent most of the film going, all right, what's the solution? Like, we get how the system operates, but what is the ultimate?
I agree.
Solution,
because it's a lot of stuff that we've heard already. Nothing against Chomsky. He takes you deeper into just saying this shit is all corrupt. Like, he takes you deeper into they're lying to you, but there really is no solution offered. Yeah.
He does say it, but he says it very very briefly, and he goes into more detail in other interviews, and he says that it's basically or mass organization. You know, you have to do it, and it's really the only way. Um, yeah, there's no other way. Um, I think there's mass protests right now, and it will hopefully it will create some change, but there's really no that's his point of view. There's no other way.
The one thing though, okay, I take back a little bit what I said, not a whole lot, but one of the things that I did see, it wasn't really suggested. I mean, I may be wrong, but the solution was like modern day journalism works with a lot of independent shit, a lot of independent stories. Because I've learned a lot. It's crazy because like I mean you watched. Okay, I take this. This is an example. You can go online and then look at stuff that you hear about the world, or everywhere, like the stuff that's happening in Yemen. I don't know if you've seen those pictures of the starving children right now.
No.
If you go on, I mean, I haven't really heard much. You don't hear a lot about that on like the CNNs or whatever.
Not at all.
No, and it's crazy to see the pictures of these starving kids.
And one of my issues, because I've brought this up before, and people always say, oh, it's because the news doesn't want to talk about these things because it only wants to talk about what's sensational. It's like, fucking show those pictures in Yemen, and it doesn't get more sensational than that. Show what's going on in Syria.
Fuck, you could just go to Flint, like
Flint. Show what's in fucking
that
Flint.
Still hasn't been resolved.
Michigan, yes,
right.
Like you don't have to go that far, man. Like
But you have common people.
You know what? You know what's a real trip? When I was listening to Noam Chomsky as he was discussing the elites in the system, the thing that makes the United States or really unique in among all the other countries. I mean, we're not the only capitalist country, but we are, I think, the capitalist country with possibly the best resources and a really decent point start in history to be young enough to benefit from having all this stuff that we have. And here's what I've always said about capitalism itself. This is the difference between like American roots versus like European roots. You essentially have someone comes over with absolutely nothing, and we'll say the year 1682. He gets to go out and, maybe carve out a piece of land for himself, settle it under whatever rulership of the kingship, builds himself a log cabin, gets himself a mini farm going to sustain a family, a wife, and a few kids. Fast forward to 1776, Revolutionary War, and then we have the American system. We're done away with inheritance of dukes and duchesses and all that other stuff. Everything is, we're going to be elected. Only educated white men can vote.
Landowners.
And landowners, right? Which are people who have held on to these lands that have been granted to them from royalty X. And then, or from whatever, or maybe they established some early companies going on under the crown. But then you have even more people because there's so much land and even more people coming in and more opportunity. And that's really when capitalism starts to shine. You have all these people who get to go out, apply for their homesteads and stuff under various acts and, lands and things like that, and carve out a niche for themselves. And we're not even going to touch on how slavery built up the South. That's a whole nother episode. But I'm talking about like the average American person out in Indiana who's chopping wood and thinks, hey, I could probably make a logging business, right? Or I can maybe set up a little convenience store and sell like licorice to the kids and then serious goods to the adults, and right, and you get to apply for your little business legalities, pay your taxes to the government or whatever state, and then you move forward. And then your little business, we'll say, it gets bigger and it gets passed down to the next family. And then by modern times, somehow that little general store has turned into like Walgreens. Now, the dude that started the very first little pharmacy out in whatever town in 18 whatever that grew into, I don't know if Walgreens actually has this particular history, I'm just using them as a name example. They didn't intend on, like, no one that starts like a small operation, especially if you go far back enough, thinks that it's going to be a big monolithic thing with a corporate office, right? It was started with some little mom and pop who wanted a business in order to feed their family as a trade. But what happens in the beginning of capitalism is beautiful because it feels like, okay, everybody can just own their own little thing and everybody can squeak out a living. But what ends up happening is that over time, a successful company gets branded, and then the brand takes on importance and recognition, and then the brand eats up like space around itself, and the company ends up growing to the point to where there's very little room for that wonderful competition. There's very little room for, because at first it's like, okay, it's room for everyone, and then it's like, oh, now it's competing for that room, and now you get to a point where there's little to no real competition, and that's a problem. We're kind of at the end point where, like, I can't start a soda company from scratch if that's my dream. Who's going to buy Joaquin Cokes when Joaquin Cola, when everyone's going to be like, I want Coca-Cola or Pepsi Cola or Edge Cola or whatever. You know what I mean? So we're kind of stuck. Like, if I want to be in the soda business, I have to like work on the bottom at a factory or drive the truck. At that point, the dream of capital building stuff and having any true choice is kind of gone. You know what I mean? Like, we're living in the butt end of that.
The butt end of
it's
capitalism.
Capitalism.
Yes,
because the companies run as socialists in a way, right?
I mean, it's kind of no, it's not. I wouldn't say that the companies are a form of socialism. I would say the companies are more like
they internally they run as like socialists.
I don't understand what you're saying, JD.
I don't think I'm understanding what I'm trying to understand the point. Is that what you're saying?
My point is that people. Well, I was just saying, like, it's kind of ironic that these giant companies that control, like, that are sending money to the pocketbooks of our politicians. Like Noam Chomsky's pointing out that there are all these big businesses that sort of sway how things go.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't start out as these megalomaniac monsters. They started out, if you go far back enough, as these simple businesses that just wanted to make a living, and now they've turned into monsters.
Like McDonald's. Perfect movie to watch.
All of them. Everything you can think of. So people that's.
I
think we lost Joaquin.
Is that okay? I was going to ask this while he was talking about that. Is that an American thing? Is there any other?
No, actually, I'm glad you asked that. So we have this thing, right? I think it's called American exceptionalism, when we believe that we pretty much rule the world because Americans are superior. Now, I think if you ask a lot of Americans maybe won't say this explicitly, but as somebody who came from a different country, it definitely feels like there is this belief that Americans are superior to everyone else, and even American products. Sometimes like we believe that are superior to other products. Though America rules the world because what happened is during World War II, you had other huge powers fighting each other. Right? You had the big powers were England, France, and they were fighting. England, France, and the Soviet Union, and they were fighting Japan and Germany.
In Italy,
right. There was a bunch of others. Anyways, they were fighting so long that basically they all knocked each other down, and the U.S. comes in pretty late into the war and defeats a weakened Germany. In fact, recent history says that the Soviet Union actually was the one that did most of the fighting against
Right.
Germany.
Speaking
And
of that, speaking of this topic, have you seen the guy that directed? There's a documentary that talks about this.
Oliver Stone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that he talks about how the Russians were so afraid that the U.S. because it was likely that the U.S. and Russia would join forces to attack Russia.
Mm-hmm.
The Germans and the U.S. would join forces to attack Russia.
Yeah.
And it's like, looking at our history books, like that's very unlikely. But like, nah,
But
it's very likely because they hated Russia that much.
Right. There's a lot of things that aren't in our history books. For example, I think we turned away at least one ship that was filled with Jews, if not more ships that were filled with Jews, and they had to go back. And a lot of those Jews that made it all the way over here ended up going back and dying in Germany.
There was a ship.
I mean, we had Nazis. We had Nazis in this country during World War II. That was a thing.
Hey, can you hear me?
Can you hear us, Joaquin?
I'm sorry, you guys went out.
Okay, go ahead, JD.
No, well, there was a ship filled with German refugees that I believe it went to New York, and then they got turned away.
Yeah, and then they went to I think they went to Cuba, and they got turned away from there.
Got turned away there too, and then a lot of them ended up. You said they had to go back, and then they got slaughtered. Yeah.
Another thing that wasn't in the history books was that when Pearl Harbor was attacked, they had attacked, I think, 2 other sites. One in the Philippines, which was a property that was owned by the U.S., and I think there might have been one more. And we don't remember those attacks. I think what the elites decided was that the way to get the U.S. to rally against this common enemy was by focusing on the place that was attacked that was filled with white people. Because, in the Philippines, I think it was a lot of Filipinos that died, whereas the base in Pearl Harbor, it was white American soldiers. Anyways, so these big powers basically knock themselves down, and then the U.S. comes and fills this vacuum, and they take over through military, but even through other types of industries. I remember learning cinema history where basically they come in and they start selling movies to the world. Before World War II, everybody was making movies. You have a lot of like German. I think it's called Impressionism. It was a genre.
Expressionism, I think.
Yeah. But after that, like nobody was really making movies the way that the U.S. was, because they had the best economy at the time, and it's pretty much used that boost to be the current.
Even though I don't like what it stands for, it was like it in itself was a revolutionary thing. The way it I believe it was one of the first films to have jump scenes or cut scenes. Birth of a Nation. I'm sure you guys have heard of that.
Yeah. Well, that one's an American.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like it revolutionized film because there was no cut scenes or jump scenes. I forgot what it was called, like that before. And even though it's a film that that's the story of the KKK, but the film itself was revolutionary. I mean, that's just an example of.
Yeah, you can't go into film school without studying W.D. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. Not because of its subject matter, but because of its technicality. He created things that are still used in films today, like juxtaposition shots and things like that, a little side by side. Yeah, that's all him.
I wanted to talk about something because this incident actually happened after this film that we just were talking about, and then you were talking about military gas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the story of Pat. What's his name? He was one of the guys that went to.
Patton?
No. He was a He was actually a NFL Pat Tillman. He was an NFL player who left the NFL to go serve in the military after 9/11. He was inspired by 9/11 to go and fight terrorism. But once he was in the war, he saw that they were just out there in Afghanistan protecting poppy fields. And one of the things that he was doing while he was still in Afghanistan, because he wanted to come back. He didn't believe in what he was doing anymore. So who he reached out to was actually Noam Chomsky, because he wanted to talk about that. And then Noam talks a lot about war crimes. That's like, he talked about that here and how we support people we support murder squads in other countries and whatnot.
Dictators.
Yeah. So he was actually, I don't know if you guys know about Pat Tillman, but he died from friendly fire.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and his whole death is kind of there's, I mean, you could say conspiracy, and it's interesting because in the film, and it's interesting because in the film, Noam Chomsky says that the term conspiracy is it's thrown at anything that's supposed to be analytical of institutions, which like I think we've mentioned before that the whole term conspiracy theories came from the CIA to kind of weaken anyone's any kind of any kind of thing that may be true. I believe with this, there's a documentary on Pat Tillman, because based on what he was doing, shortly after that he died with friendly fire. They didn't tell the family that he died from friendly fire until after the funeral. Like, it's a fucked up story, and he was actually from San Jose. I don't know if you guys.
No, I hadn't heard of that.
I remember on the news during the war on terror. I can't remember if this was in Iraq or if this was in Afghanistan. But I remember the story was that there were some U.S. soldiers who were protecting an oil field, and they were noted to say to the locals, "Do not burn the oil fields for your own sake." And I remember going, "F the oil fields. It's their land. Like, what you mean for their own sake? It's not like they're going to reap any profits. Shell's going to reap the profits. BP's going to reap the Chevron. Like, get out of here with that. My tax dollars are over here protecting oil fields, and we're supposed to be hunting the people that bombed us. Excuse me?"
Exactly.
No, I don't know. I think in retrospect, it seems like it's really all about oil. There's really nothing else.
Oil and poppy.
Of course. I mean, I knew that at the time, but I'm just saying, like, you claim it's one thing, but it's really another.
But isn't it
really
weird?
Tick me off.
It's those two things. It's this is what my brother pointed out. If you notice, whenever there's a military presence in whether it's a strong military presence, whether it's right now it's also Russia, or if there's a strong military presence in there, prices kind of go up, and when there's not a lot, prices go down.
I didn't know that.
I mean, that's something to analyze. That's one of the things we could probably have my brother on one day. It'd be this guy talks about stuff, again, like it's crazy that this whole thing started because of terror, but once they're there, you see it's oil, and not only is it oil, it's poppy fields. And if you look at opioid addiction is fucking massive. Like
the medical, the
not just
the big pharma,
like it doesn't even
farming out
cocaine and weed and whatever illegal drugs don't even put a dent to the opioid addiction, man. And who's one of the biggest ones that use that is a lot of it is in China. And China, we owe a lot of money to. How do you control someone that you owe money, you owe something from? You control something they need. That's. I mean,
opium is even found in over-the-counter drugs. I had a stomach bug last week. Lasted a day. I had to go get some Imodium. Imodium has like a chemical in it that is it's based off of an opioid,
sure.
right out of the poppy fields,
Yeah.
It's in a lot of stuff.
So going back to
money
the.
to be made.
Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of money to be made.
Right.
Lot of money.
A lot of legitimate money. I mean, it's illegitimate in that we're like kind of, in a way, it's kind of being stolen, like militarily taken in possession from other people's countries and then, sold to us on our counters. But, it's air quotes legitimately made.
Because it's legal. That's the only thing.
It's legal, but it's also like the biggest, especially with opioids, man. That's the way higher mortality rate, and this shit gets prescribed daily. That's the fucked up part about it. I had a friend who went. My brother. Well, it was a perfect example. My brother was offered all these opioids when he was, and the come down was a motherfucker. And it's crazy. Like all these years, marijuana is legal. When like, I mean, I'm not saying it works for everybody, but it doesn't have the effects that some of these opioids have, man. Like I've seen people, friends and family members on opioids, and it makes sense why people make so much, these big pharma make so much money, dude. It's a different addiction. It's like people say like heroin, for example. It's a way stronger addiction than any other, and then it's so easy to overdose on it. Which, from what I read, it when you go to sleep, it does something that it forgets to tell your heart to keep beating, which is why a lot of them die when they're sleeping.
You know what's frustrating is that, like, I'm a huge fan of science, right?
It sounds like you're talking about a band.
Right. But partly because of how big pharma has screwed us over, I think people are very, very skeptical of science. I know I was one of those where I was like, oh, science failed us in this. And when you think about it, it wasn't science at all. It was capitalism. It was
big business.
Yeah, it was a for-profit structure that pretended to use science. And we didn't know any better.
I mean, I think they use science effectively. I just think that they weren't honest about what direction they were taking the science in. Like they go, okay, we can sell you, we can push these prescriptions on you through the doctor. That's highly addictive prescriptions, and we can make a fortune because you're going to want to come back and you're going to want more. And we know that it's highly addictive because of the science. You know what I mean? So I think they totally used science effectively. They just didn't use it morally. You know what I mean? It was a form of, mad science, like Lex Lutherian kind of science.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like science.
Yeah.
Seems like they like they're working with a gun to their head, like crank out these whatever and say it's good, or the way that some doctors just jump on. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the hospital where they don't really ask you anything and they just automatically prescribe something.
No, I haven't heard of that.
And that's very common, and I've actually experienced that. And that's how a lot of, someone told me, like, there's a doctor that I actually worked at his house, and he was still a practicing physician, but he says the way they train us on like the whole prescribing part of it, he didn't describe it like that, but he just said the way that they're kind of trained to prescribe is very similar to sales pitches at like car salesmen.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
The way you're saying it, like,
right.
Yeah, damn, that's crazy.
And that's a whole other.
When I had my broken leg a few years.
Go ahead, Joaquin.
When I had my broken leg a few years back, they gave me hydrocodone.
Yeah.
And I don't remember asking for it, but I was in a lot of pain, so why would I ask any questions? And I knew, I had read up about the stuff, and I had heard about opioid addictions, and I was only allowed to take, I think it was like one, maybe two a day or something like that. And there were days where I would either really, really try to space it out, but I kept trying to see, okay, how long can I really go without taking one? You know what I mean? Like, and there were some days where, especially as like the healing progressed, where I was determined, even if my leg was really, really sore, I was like, I'm not taking one today. Because the last thing I wanted was to have an addiction on my neck, you know?
When I
But
when I dislocated my
but not
shoulder,
everybody is so lucky or so blessed. Some people just, off of one or two hits, or some people are in even worse pain than I was, who just have no choice but to pop those pills, and then it's like, then they become zombies. You know what I mean? It's a shame.
when I dislocated my shoulder, they drugged me when they put it back, and then they gave me OxyContin. And the next day, the drug that they gave me started to wear off, and that dislocating my shoulder is one of the most painful things I've ever experienced, because you have all these senses inside there that you're not used to feeling anything in your shoulder. Like, I'm not talking about inside the socket. And so any little movement where your shoulder moves, it was painful. And so I had to take the pills, I think every 6 hours or every 12 hours. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to play video games because that's all I can do. I was bummed out that I couldn't play soccer anymore, which is how I hurt myself. And I didn't like how it made me feel. I remember, I'm playing, and it was time to take the medicine, and I took it. And I'm just like sitting there, the game's still going, and I'm just sitting there not pressing any buttons. It was like I spaced out. And when I realized, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I don't want to take this anymore. I'll take the physical pain, because at least I can enjoy the day as much as you can. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not taking this anymore. And I kept almost the whole bottle. I must have only taken it a handful of times. So going back to this whole media thing, the way that issues are framed, I think it's very limiting, right? You have I'm going to name some very polemic issues, and I don't want to go into detail, but I just kind of want to point out how we think about them, right? You have the issue of immigration, which has been a hot topic, especially recently. But for the most part, the only way it's talked about is whether it's good or bad, right? And pretty much anytime it comes up with like a stranger, it's immigration good or bad? Should we throw immigrants out or should we keep them?
When you ask that question, they never. It's like you only see one side of it. You only see the immigrants crossing, but you never find out like why they're crossing. And if you look at that's kind of what this guy was talking about. The documentary is, you only see one side of the problem. You don't see both sides of it. And that whole, like, for example, the immigration problem is a lot of these big corporations, this big cabal of corporations, or whatever, they've kind of we're fucking over a lot of these third world countries to have the lifestyle that we enjoy here.
Mm-hmm.
and that fucks up their countries,
mm-hmm.
Mexico, El Salvador, and that's why they're leaving. Like, dude, I mean, like I said this before, how much it would take for me to move out of here,
Right.
Like, what would it take? Like, Gaspar, how hard was it to move out to Antioch? Like, for me, that's a big move. Something horrible must happen for you to decide to leave.
Right.
Everything and it's not as simple as like, oh, they want to enjoy the American dream. They're not trying to enjoy the American dream. They want to escape their fucking nightmare.
Right. And I imagine both of us grew up around a lot of immigrants, and
I have
always
family members.
Right. And whenever they talk about where they came from, like if you try and list, okay, what's good about there, what's good about here, they're going to tell you every single thing was better where I lived, except the one thing that made them leave, which for most of my family, it was, finances. Like, they just couldn't afford to live there. And so they came here. but everything else was better over there. And I've lived over there. And, they're kind of right. Really, the only bad thing is that you don't have a future in terms of a financial future. You're going to be poor.
And like, for what I remember, it was like the land. Like, a lot of these corporations are taking over the land.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Amazon. A lot of big, we're talking about this, like, aside from like pharma and the oil industries, the other big dog in the finance world is the fucking food industry.
Yeah.
And they're deforesting the fuck out of the Amazon and using it to grow shit to feed cats, and they take up they're like slaughtering, like I said this in the last podcast. If you look at the list of activists who have been slaughtered in those countries for speaking out against,
right,
they're taking over their home and all that shit. Like, it's a big fucking list, man. And that's fucked up because
we've had activists slaughtered over here. Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers.
No, I'm talking about modern though. Like, this
actually, I would say that
there's one recently that was slaughtered. They killed a guy shortly before the big ass Amazon fire happened. I don't know if you remember when those fires were happening last year.
Mm-hmm.
They I believe, like, Monsanto, for example, had just lost one of the cases, and one of the leaders of the tribe or an activist who was helping them with that was, he died of whatever. He died. He was killed and never found or whatever. And then shortly after that, there was a big fire. And from what I've been reading is sometimes those fires happen when they want to clear the area. And it's like, oh, it's all burnt. Oh, man, who's going to want this area now? I'll buy it.
Right. Yeah. So a couple of other issues. Again, I don't want to go into detail because they're very polemic. But for example, when candidates are debating, one of the things is abortion, and it's the argument is always yes or no, and it doesn't go further. Another one is gay marriage, which now it is legal, but back when it was kind of a hot topic, right at the end of Bush and at the beginning of Obama, it was always like, good or bad. Same thing with global warming. We can go into detail about that one, but the argument right now is, does it exist or not? And it's like, you have so much progress to make about environmental issues, but we're wasting time on talking about whether it exists or not. And who does it favor to get stuck on that argument except elites who are benefiting from things that harm the environment?
Right, because they're benefiting. They benefit from not having to pay some of the regulations, and not only just pay, but like it costs them more, to turn a lot of this into, well,
the funny thing is that it costs them because, for example, with oil, it's actually cheaper right now to go to green energy, but these oil companies get subsidies from the government. So basically, our taxes go to pay for the oil. And so if they wanted to change to green energy, the money would have to come from them, although they probably figure out a way to subsidize it so that we end up paying it anyways. So some of it just doesn't make any sense. It just, it's convenient for the owners of these oil companies to just look away from it.
And it's like, it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense because the people that speak, like, what was that? I don't know if you guys know about that guy that invented the water engine. It was like a battery. It was like this is like long time ago, way before any Prius or any smart car. Mm-hmm. And he created I guess the battery ran on like tap water or something like that, and it was a functional car that runs on water. I know that sounds crazy, but it's a real story. You can look it up. When it became like when he like started to show people that he had created, in fact, an engine that runs on a battery that's powered by water, he was murdered. He came up dead, and they stole his idea, and it never happened.
Wow.
That's like, that's going back to what the film's talking about, is But you rarely hear about that.
Yeah.
And it's like when you say why. I mean, I'm sure the answer's out there, but they're not letting us see it.
So what is something that one thing that the media, especially the news media, loves to focus on, and it makes me pretty upset, is Trump tweets.
Yeah.
Like, turn on the
Who
news.
gives a fuck?
That's all they talk about. And you know that there are consequences to a lot of the tweets that he makes, but it's like, why is it taking up most of the time? And you know, and so
like I noticed that a lot, man, where you know you talk about what Trump said, but not so much what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we get kind of lost in this, you know, whirlpool of just tweets and words about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
When there's like measures being passed that are affecting, you
Right.
know, yeah.
Right. And so I wrote down a few things that have affected us, and you never hear it. Net neutrality, you guys remember that?
Yeah, that never got solved.
No, it did. It became it. So now it's privatized. The internet is privatized. It did pass. It did. Or you know, it went away or whatever you call it. But basically, the internet is now privatized. It is owned by whoever owns those servers. Military spending, I never hear about it.
Wait, can I ask you? Is that a good thing?
Is what a good thing? No,
about the net neutrality.
No, not at all. So I don't know. I think, for example, Comcast owns servers, right?
Wow.
So Comcast can decide.
Not good.
Yeah, not good at all. Comcast can decide. Like if you're trying to compete, let's say with I don't know, Netflix, and you decide to make your own, and you're not affiliated with one of those big movie companies, well then Comcast or Netflix can go to Comcast and be like, hey, you know what? Here's some extra money. Make JD's movie whatever. Make it slow, and so you're not going to be able to grow.
Okay, can I tell you something? Can I tell you his personal story?
Yeah.
I have experience with Comcast, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to whatever, but anyways, I had a customer who told me, you know, he bought, because Comcast you can buy your own modem, right? Or you can rent theirs out. That's the options for internet. Yeah. This customer bought his own modem. He got it hooked up. He got it all set up. As soon as he started, you know, he signed up for a certain amount of speed. Mm-hmm. I believe it was like 100 megabits of speed. Mm-hmm. And when he used his modem and his router, it was super slow. It was way slower than 100. And he called and he had a very honest whatever tech over the phone, and he told them, honestly, if you get your own, if you use ours, it'll be faster. He's like, why? If it's all, I'm a customer. He's like, they give the preference even to those customers who have. I mean, that's a small example.
Yeah.
I can imagine how on a bigger scale, but like that was a small, tiny little, how petty these big companies are.
Yeah. Yeah, and so if there's a company that's trying to prop up and create new jobs, it can't because it's not going to be able to compete against that already exist. So military spending is another one that never gets talked about. Police spending is another one. I think usually it's about a third of the money that the city makes or whatever the area makes. A third of that gets spent on the police. Which
is why they're talking about defunding the police.
But the thing is, like, if you just talked about it just a little bit in the news, the problem would end because people would get behind it. But instead, you have people that are talking about, you know, fucking looting, and there's people who genuinely feel safe with police, understandably, and they don't know that there's other people that are basically terrorized by police, you know. And so just a little bit of talking about it would help. But
I got a question, just a little off question on both of you guys. How do you feel when people say that the solution to the police brutality is more funding for police so they get more training? What do you feel about that?
You know, so this whole like what's it called? fuck, I'm spacing out. What's that thing called when workers organize? Union. This whole thing about union, it's become a bad word, right? We think that it's bad. We think that they're inefficient. We don't want them. We don't want anything to do with unions. And we even us have been brainwashed to thinking that, right? And then you're like, oh, look, the cops have a pretty good union. Like, it turns out that it's great for them. It's not great for teachers. It's not, or whoever. It's not great for anybody else to unionize. I think you might have said it earlier that anybody who mentions union gets cut, right? Well, it turns out that the police have unions. And, well, why do they have unions? Well, because they're there to protect rich people's property. And so if you're rich and you need a force to protect your property, you better make sure that they're well taken care of. And they make a lot of fucking money, like, you know, a third of the of budgets go to the police, and they have very, very good unions. That's what I think. And so, you know, you have Biden saying that he doesn't want to defund police. Well, why? Because he's backed by big money. You know, yeah.
Yeah, and then right, because the thing about you said, like we talked about this earlier, you follow the money. Like, unions all over the country support Democrats. That's one of the oil companies highly support Republicans. The unions are fully behind Democrats. So, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So I noticed that it's getting pretty late. Are you guys okay with doing a second part? Because there's still a lot of ground to cover. I'm happy to keep going right now, but I know you have to get up early, JD.
Right. I mean, just keep going, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
As it goes.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of you guys feel though.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Joaquin dropped out, but so I'll go to the next quote. He says, in a totalitarian society, the dictator says, "We're going to war," and everybody marches. Right. In a democratic society, leadership commits to war and presents reasons, and they have a very heavy burden of proof to meet because war is catastrophic. The role of media is to present background, possibility of peaceful settlements, and offer a debate. To go to war, offer a debate. A debate to go to war, kill hundreds of thousands of people, and leave countries wrecked. And he says that never happened. And I think because of when the documentary came out, he's talking about maybe Vietnam or
a Desert Storm.
Yeah,
the Gulf War.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, the same thing happened with Afghanistan, and there was a lot of support for Afghanistan because we saw, our own territory get attacked.
Right. It was an emotional decision that they were able to make.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
And he actually has a book that talks about that, and I listened to one of his lectures, and he says how with Afghanistan, an option would have been to basically there was so the people in Afghanistan did not like the Taliban. No, they did not like Al Qaeda. Sorry, they did not like Al Qaeda. And so they could have armed a group because even the Taliban did not control all of Afghanistan. So what they could have done was they could have sided with one of the groups that favored the U.S. They could have armed them, and that
take them out because they weren't that big.
Right. But they didn't. Instead, they went straight in and started bombing the shit out of Afghanistan and pretty much destroyed a lot of it. And there's a parallel between that and dropping atomic bombs in Japan. Right. Now we know that I think Japan had intentions of surrendering, but we went ahead and
actually already made it public. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But we went ahead and flexed anyways, and that's kind of what happens in Afghanistan, where the U.S. had a lot of weapons that it had to basically show off to the rest of the world. I think it was similar with Iraq. One of those weapons that we know of are the drone strikes. That shit is scary,
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. No. Man. Especially especially like in Obama's administration, where he wanted to, take out like a guy in a building that they knew the guys in this building, send in the drone, and we're gonna kill all these kids and all these innocent people just to get that one guy.
Right.
That's the scary thing about, I mean, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to see. Well, the thing is, would you want to rather see boots on the ground?
Well, that's the argument that Chomsky made, was that there were other options. You didn't have to put boots on the ground. You didn't have to send drone strikes. You could have let them on
honestly.
themselves.
There's no need for it. If you like you were saying, you could literally do that for every major issue. You can literally just arm people in that who want to kill them already.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. It's like you need a white, like you're doing it for something else. You need a white flag, or was it a false flag incident like they're saying 9/11 was, to get in, to fucking just to give us something to back them, because I feel like that's what 9/11 was. Whether it was there's a whole thing about that being an inside job, whatever it is. They took advantage of that moment to go to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether that was, planned, funded by the U.S. or not. Like they just like coronavirus is being used for other things.
Right.
They're taking advantage of the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
I would say this, going back to Noam Chomsky's, manufactured consent. I think it speaks volumes that the media. Well, I mean, some of the news reporting was, you got the idea that this definitely was about oil, but like, even though they wouldn't necessarily say it, but you would have to be kind of not thinking. As I remember, I don't know about you guys, but I remember following the news when they were overseas hunting Osama bin Laden. And I remember how they claimed that they had tracked him to some sort of mountain range or some caves over in Afghanistan, and that the Northern Alliance was with us, and we supposedly had him cornered somewhere. And then all of a sudden, right when we had him cornered, supposedly, the narrative changes. And then Bush comes out and says, we have to deal with Iraq because we have intelligence that says that the pilots were trained over there, so that means Saddam is going to have to answer for that. And then I remember, and then supposedly we diverted our troops over to Iraq, which potentially settles an old debt, an old revenge debt from Bush Sr. So this is a little personal, and it's also some business on the side, thanks to Halliburton-related Vice President Dick Cheney. But my whole big thing was like, but we had the skinny dude on dialysis cornered, and we let him go. This is some bulls. You know what I mean? Like, this is complete bull.
The crazy thing about it, the crazy thing about that is when you look at the info that they had, they weren't trained in Iraq. They were fucking trained. They went and actually were trained here in America by a school owned by Warren Buffett.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like they had him cornered. Yeah, they had him cornered, and he was on like, imagine a guy on dialysis in a fucking cave. Like, he's gonna die eventually, So it's like when they went into Iraq. Yeah, dude. That's a whole podcast episode in itself, man.
Yeah. So there was a few. Go ahead.
But like I said, the media. I can't remember what news station I was following at the time when I don't think it was Fox. It might have been ABC. But I remember very clearly the media was like, yeah, we're having cornered. And then the coverage became, and even though, and I would say where the manufacturer comes from is the fact that they totally dropped the story on the progress of tracking down Osama bin Laden, and all the focus went to the Ba'athist Party. And I think that is definitely evidence of manufacture of consent, because the media chose not to cover the search for the actual mastermind behind everything.
Yeah.
And it's totally switched to the scapegoat. And not just television news, but newspapers as well. Every now and then, somebody might bring up the skinny one, but really I think people kind of forgot about him until Obama sent a team in to have him killed. At that point, it seems like the skinny dude on dialysis was an afterthought, and that's thanks to the media making it that way.
And I don't mean to sound conspiracy theorist, but I don't know if I listen to a lot of old radio on YouTube, and one of the interesting things that I listen to is Patrice O'Neill's take on the assassination of Osama bin Laden, which he says, if you are a person in power or whatever, in what scenario do you just dump the body out in fucking, in the middle of the ocean? It's like one thing that you looked at also that he talked about in this old radio interviews during the time that they killed Osama bin Laden. Obama's ratings were really low, and that boosted him.
Look at that!
Boosted him up way, almost to the level of Bush. He says, imagine if they would have killed Osama bin Laden during Bush's term, Bush would have probably been allowed to be president 4 more terms.
And he died right before elections, right? Bin Laden?
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah. Right before. Yep. 20. What was it?
2011, I think.
2011, going into 2012, and so his ratings skyrocketed up, and then the whole death of Osama bin Laden, it was just sketchy. Even and this was something that Patrice O'Neill also, and I'm referring to a comedian about something news related, but just a lot of it makes sense. In every look at when they killed Gaddafi, they had an American so what was he, senator, posing, smiling with the body, and that was after Osama bin Laden. And is it just like they did when Jesse James, when they killed Jesse James or Che Guevara? They always, when anyone who's an enemy of the state or an enemy of whatever, they always, and then it just made the whole mystique of, that guy's already dead, even more, because a lot of people said that photograph of his death photograph was fake. They're saying it was Photoshop.
Of Gaddafi or
of Osama bin Laden, the one picture.
I mean, considering the fact that bin Laden's the bin Laden family was supposedly a bunch of friends of the Bush family,
exactly.
And going with the idea that a lot of the former presidents, since they run in the same circles, they're all best buddies. That's one of the theories. Then it is possible that out as a favor to Bush and the CIA and whoever might have, and I'm just saying this is just theory here. I'm not saying this is what happened.
Right.
But under the idea that everyone's in cahoots with each other, and Obama goes, all right, well, let's make it look like we killed Osama bin Laden. Osama, you keep hiding because we're all secretly in the same club together. And we'll go kill, quote unquote, you, quote unquote, right? And everyone's happy. Because, Bush is my homie, and he's actually, your families are good. So I will not actually kill the real Osama bin Laden. I mean, I guess that's I don't know. I find it hard to believe that everybody is in cahoots, because it's sort of that thing where it's I mean, you gotta have somebody up there with their own opinions and wants. It's possible, on the other hand, that Obama just faked the killing of Osama, that rhymed, just on his own, because he couldn't find the real Osama. You know what I mean? Maybe he was looking and he was like, well, I can't find the guy, so I'll just kill off a dummy. You know what I mean?
Well, it just, his whole death is just, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't line up with the way they take out everyone else out. That's all I'm saying. That makes sense. me. And yeah, I mean, I don't believe everyone's in cahoots, but definitely the truth gets twisted around. Let's say they, for whatever reason they had already killed him, and like let's hold off on sharing this news, because then how the fuck are we gonna bring everyone back? I mean, how the fuck are we gonna keep people out here if he's already dead? Especially the people that were for, the killing of Osama bin Laden when 9/11 happened. All right, you killed him, right? What are we still doing here? A lot of that eventually gets other, That's
So
like
you think
you don't
So
kill.
you think it's possible that Osama had maybe died when they cornered him and that supposedly found him in the caves, and
I mean, I'm not.
they,
It's possible. I mean, I
and they
wouldn't say
just
no
kept
to
it
it.
a White House secret, like a government secret for the next several years? I guess it's possible.
I mean, anything's possible. At this point, I'm not denying anything because it just. I don't know. I mean, the way going back to the manufacturer of consent, things are twisted around a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened. I just like, I mean, the idea of it is definitely something that should be talked about.
There would have to be a whole lot of people keeping this secret. And then the question becomes, well, at what point did Obama discover the secret that, you know, Osama had been dead for quite some time? You know what I mean? Like, is it something that the CIA briefed him on? Like, hey, we chose not to release this information to the public, but years ago we ran an op and we found the guy, we killed him. We just haven't said anything because the orders at the time were we need a reason to stay there. But now that you're president, we can kind of tell you this, but please, Mr. President, don't say anything. And then it becomes up to Obama as to whether or not he feels it is right to go ahead and expose the previous administration's cover up, or if he goes, I might need this in my pocket for later. Or did they threaten him? Did they say something to him like, well, if you tell the American populace, well, the last time we had a president we didn't agree with, John F. Kennedy, you've seen what happened to him.
Exactly.
2 bullets.
Yeah.
2 bullets, grassy knoll, son. You know what I'm saying? So I mean,
That's how they worded it.
And then, I know that's obviously not how they worded it. They're not. They're not like hip hoppers from New York. But
everything you've mentioned is possible. I mean, what if Osama bin Laden was already dead by the time 9/11 happened? I mean, that's possible too. It was a different world back then.
This video.
Well, it's not possible.
That kind of stuff was just like pre-recorded
beforehand. Is that what you're saying? I'm just saying that what is.
Well, I'm just saying they were all pre-recorded.
I'll say an interesting.
You know those tapes that he would release.
I don't know. There's this guy, Bill Cooper, who is one of those most infamous, very infamous conspiracy theorists. He says a lot of crazy shit that I don't believe, but there's a lot of shit that kind of sometimes whatever. He already passed. He died. I believe he died before 2001. But he had his radio show, and he worked for the White House. Again, the guy has some really crazy stuff in his books, and some of his theories are really out there about UFOs. But there's some stuff that he actually sometimes touched on. One of the things was on his radio broadcast. This is before 9/11. He said that the U.S. was planning something, and whatever it is, they're gonna blame it on Osama bin Laden. It was something big, and I don't know. It just that kind of stuff, just the whole, and then the Bush family being friends with Osama. I don't know. It's like the people were saying that there was explosives in the building. That's the least of the. I mean, of course that's bad, but that's the least of the things that I look at when it comes to the whole 9/11 thing.
So he actually does talk about the 9/11 thing in another video. He doesn't believe that the towers were knocked down by Americans. He says that it doesn't make any sense because they all ended up being from Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia has a good relationship with the U.S. Yeah, and I think when he makes statements, he tends to stick to things that he can prove. Which I don't know. I think he doesn't go into detail in manufacturing consent, but what he does is he reads, official documents, things like military reports and things like that, and he says that that's where you get a lot of these truths. So the whole thing about going to war against an enemy that in an unjust way is kind of all over American history and probably all over any history. I'm reading this book about American history, and I'm right at the beginning. Well, actually, I'm somewhere in the 1800s, I think, 1700s.
What book?
It's called. Here, let me get it. It's called a different mirror: A History of Multicultural America by Ronald Takaki. Okay. And so right now I'm reading about wars against Indians, and it's nothing but that. It's nothing but that, like basically killing Indians, killing all these tribes, lying to them, saying treaties, and then going back on them. And we know how they did it. Like, I think it wasn't until like the 60s or 70s when Americans started to kind of reflect and be like, hey, you know what? These Indians weren't really that bad. And you get all these Western movies and Indian movies, movies where the Indians are now all of a sudden not the bad guy. That's crazy though, because it's that it took that long for us to realize that, hey, maybe we did the wrong thing. But not long after that, we've kind of just put it away and we don't talk about it. And there's other wars, there's the whole, like, after the Industrial Revolution is when the U.S. starts to do the same thing in Latin America. And, with the Indians, it was for land, and in Latin America, it was for natural resources. In Cuba, it was for sugar and but we are also doing it now. It's in the Middle East for oil, and I think we have people in Yemen and Syria, I think.
And to touch real quick, just to touch on the Cuban thing, it's interesting because, like, if you look at advertisements, I don't know if there's this documentary on Netflix called the Cuba Libre.
I just finished watching it. Okay, I haven't seen the last 2 episodes.
Oh, okay, but do you remember the sugar during the Industrial Revolution when the sugar was a big deal? The they showed like an ad in America that's like they were advertising sugar as healthy.
Right.
Because they wanted it,
pretty much like the pharmaceuticals right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's funny. It's like
Well, I think like right now one of the things that gets attacked is and I don't know if you guys have seen this where they merged all these news stations, they lined them all up, and they all kind of sound the same. Where it talks about they're all talking about alternative news media, because right now they're all trying to get your eyes off of those other independent journalists.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Is that on YouTube or what?
I'll send it to you guys.
Please.
It's a creepy fucking thing, man. It's like very Orwellian. It came, I think it was like last year. Because during actually it might be longer than that. It might have been during the elections.
Yeah.
But like that's who they don't want you to look at. Whatever they don't want you to look at, they kind of throw something out there, very right. I don't know.
And so go ahead.
During 9/11, I hated Saddam. I remember we all hated Saddam, like that fucking evil bastard.
Yeah, he was even the villain in South Park.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah. So, it's pretty obvious to find out what the media does want us to hate, right? Right now, for example, it's crazy because you've seen the story going around about how the Chinese are killing Muslims. I think they're putting them in like concentration camps, and which I'm sure it's true. But what right do we have to point our fingers at that when we have kids in fucking cages?
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it on my Facebook feed where people are sharing, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Are you not able to look at yourself? Are you not able to look at your own people? To me, it just seems like it's a classic propaganda where it's like
it's always easier to point the finger. And
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And right now, China, like Trump is like seen as the as the like he's China's the bully, and Trump is kind of shown as the guy that defends you from bullies. You know,
Right.
yeah. So
And
that
you know,
anything anti-China is like the shit right now.
and during our lifetime, we've had other of these enemies that the media wants us to look at. You know, Iraq was that for a long time. North Korea is that. Cuba,
Russia,
Russia,
yeah.
Venezuela. You know,
Any Arab, like any Arab of whatever country, like just Arabs.
well, not necessarily Arabs, yes, but
If you look at movies, I'm talking about
Right,
movies. Like
absolutely.
it's always, yeah.
absolutely.
Look
Yeah.
at the movie, for a stupid example, but the movie with Adam Sandler, like You Don't Mess with the Zohan, like
Mhm.
all the villains were all Arabs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
Palestinians.
the heroes are all Israeli, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like that is straight up propaganda right there. Like,
Yeah.
you know? And that's a movie. You would think that it's like, oh, I can, you know, it's not the movies. It's you know, it's fucking everything, every single thing. Video games are full of the same imagery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. So yeah, this whole thing with you know, it's gonna get dark. We're committing genocide. We're currently committing genocide, and you know, you have the whole thing in Yemen, which I'm not exactly sure how exactly the U.S. is involved. I think we're supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia, right?
From when the thing is, I don't know who is. From my understanding is, yeah, we're supporting Saudi Arabia because we have a good relationship with them.
Yeah. So I think Yemen is or was having a civil war, and so Saudi Arabia is taking the side of whatever the establishment was.
Yeah.
So the U.S. is providing
regime.
Huh?
The regime.
Yeah. And so the U.S. is providing weapons to Saudi Arabia, which then Saudi Arabia is killing, you know, the people of Yemen.
Yeah.
And we did it to our own people. You remember Hurricane Katrina?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We starved them out basically.
Abandoned them.
Yeah. But as soon as another country does it that's not friendly with us,
right,
we're gonna point our finger.
Yep.
You know?
Like I remember when again, going back to China, when the Philippines had this major earthquake, they criticized China for how much I believe they donated 100,000. I don't know. So it was a really small, like, you know, it wasn't a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They got criticized by like all the news stations here in the U.S.
Yeah. That's crazy. Hell, we don't have to go far. Right before our own protest, they were protesting in Hong Kong, and the news media was criticizing the Chinese government for not giving Hong Kong residents their freedoms that they were asking for. And not long after that, we're having our own, and you know, the same argument is not there anymore.
You know what that does, man? Like that criticizing another big nation for what they don't give their people. It makes us look at them, but it also makes them look like a very third world, freedom starved country.
Yeah, which we love that narrative.
Yeah,
you know, that was the whole thing that was there when during the invasion of Afghanistan.
It's like I know, fuck, but look at that motherfucker. You know, like look at that piece of shit over there. It's like it's Felipe Esparza joke. Like, if I get, like, when you see another fat guy that's fatter than you, okay, if I get that fat, bro.
Right. We did mention, you know, situations where we kill our own people or let our own people die, and that was Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Maria. And you know, these
name it after Latin women. You notice that?
Right.
Hellfire or Fury.
I know, right?
They're feisty, bro.
There's also the situation in Yemen, and then this next one is super controversial. But you know, Palestine. We know that it's the U.S. that's providing weapons to Israel, and then Israel is, carrying out genocide in that territory. There's two more recent ones which I don't remember.
Hardcore gentrification.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about
that's
here?
What they're doing. No, to the Palestinians.
Yeah, and then you also have a lot of police brutality, and I believe you have a straight up starvation, like they cut off aid and things like that. And then there's two more that are happening right now, very recent, and I don't know if we mentioned them. And that one is the COVID situation, where we've let a lot of people die because we didn't, there were no tests, there was no PPE to the doctors, there was no contact tracing. And now what the news that just came out, I think a couple days ago, was that the thing was that it was only happening in blue states or blue cities. And so the plan of the administration was, let it happen. It'll make it look like it was a failure of Democratic governors, and it'll help us out in the elections.
Yeah,
a pretty bad plan. I think any of us could have realized that, considering that the thing came all the way from China, and now it's spilled all over. And the worst places are actually, I think, red states.
Yep.
And the other one is it's what's been happening to the immigrants. The kids in cages is the worst, but there's it's happening to all types of immigrants. And especially with the immigrants, the numbers of people that are harmed are not going to come out immediately. Like, we have a day-to-day count of deaths and of COVID, even though the numbers will keep changing as time goes on. In terms of what's happening with immigrants, those numbers, we won't know them immediately. It won't just be the people that from COVID, the people that are being disappeared, the people that are trafficked. There's also going to be a lot of long-term effects, things like suicide or things like that. Any thoughts on that, on those things?
I agree that things could have been handled a little bit better, like way better, if leadership in the first place had taken it seriously instead of saying it was a big hoax. We wouldn't have had such. We could have cut it off early. Could have nipped it in the bud.
Thank God.
I also think.
Can you imagine how much worse we get off if we had Hillary in office? Oh my God!
Actually, if we had Hillary in office, I'm pretty sure that the stuff that Obama had established that Trump got rid of would still be in place. Because you remember, he had an office specifically built to handle pandemics. And one of the first things that our president did when he came in was dismantle that.
Because there hadn't been a pandemic ever. It was a waste of resources.
There was the Spanish flu in 1819, and there's new diseases popping up all throughout.
And there's also
his administration.
There had also been, very recently, back to back, stuff that could have potentially became pandemic, like the swine flu.
I was just saying that. I don't know if you heard me, JD, but I was just saying.
I did not hear you. I did not hear you. I could barely hear you.
Yeah, I was just, or maybe I was about to say it, but yeah, there have been diseases, because I had said there have been diseases that have been popping up, and then you went, well, yeah, plus there have been.
And I'm glad.
But, you had what's that crazy African Ebola?
Yeah.
Ebola.
That could have easily made it over here had certain things not been handled right, and I do believe it was because of the administration that was in charge at the time is the reason Ebola never made it over to the United States.
That's purely speculatory.
This sucker made it over to the United States.
I'm glad you said waste of resources, because that's actually a good way to tie it to manufacturing consent, where you have very few people that are controlling the narrative, and we have this thing where we think that everything has to exist for profit, including our healthcare. And it doesn't even fit in our heads that maybe healthcare should not be run for profit. Had it, would it not? If it wasn't run for profit, we would be way more prepared for a pandemic. But and we all believe it. I mean, one of us just said it was wasting resources. What good does it do for us that the healthcare system not waste resources? We know that everything that's for profit, all that profit is siphoned to very few people. Like your jobs, you guys don't see that profit. You guys are paid a wage, and regardless of what the profit is, your pays don't go up.
And can I say something?
Yeah.
That kind of ties into the whole we need someone like Trump because he needs to run this like a business. Mm-hmm. This isn't a fucking business, man. Right. It's like, yeah, you don't see the profit or the benefit of it, but that's where you don't need a businessman at, because this is some fucking opportunity scheme that, this is protecting lives.
And the other thing is that, I bet the Democrats love this. Like, we're blaming Trump, and a lot of it is his fault. But it's not just Trump.
No, it's not just Trump.
Right?
That's the thing, yeah.
But the Democrats are probably happy that.
Granted, governors like the governor of Mississippi and the governor of Florida do have a hand in the absolute moronic decisions that they've made. Like, I love how the governor of Mississippi had said in response to something that was addressed to him. We're talking about how, like, the Chinese were handling the COVID outbreak in their country, and it worked over there. Maybe the governor of Mississippi should consider shutting things down. And his only response is, "We're not China." That's not a valid reason. You know what I'm saying? That's like saying, well, this incredibly successful strategy worked over here, and it was just simply wear a bulletproof vest in areas where guns are carried. And then you're like, well, I'm not James. That's not a good reason not to wear a bulletproof vest, dumbass. Good for you. You're not James.
The other thing that I've been very skeptical about is how everybody's talking about the masks, right? Like, wear your mask. Wear your mask. No, I don't want to wear my mask. Wear your mask. No, it's giving my freedom. But what the countries who solved things did, I mean, obviously they had masks, but they also had contact tracing. They had testing. They had a lot of places they canceled rent. They're getting paychecks. And so I think as long as us are talking about masks, it's great for the elites, because we're not talking about other things such as putting money into contact tracing and things like that.
Also, as much as the government has indeed, the institution, the administration has indeed failed us, even with the information floating around out there about, like, what the virus can do, basics on how to, like, keep from getting it, the whole let's isolate and what have you, there are plenty of people who heard all that information and continue to go out anyway. So a lot of it is, personal responsibility. These fools going out there and partying and what have you, and coming back and hugging their grandparents. Like, what's wrong with y'all? So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, some of it is, it's not like the stuff is ultra hidden at this point, and people are still going out and partying like knuckleheads.
Right.
And it's we're never going to get rid of this disease, in part because
it's
people do what they want.
It's not just partying. I mean, it's also like a perfect example of that. Where I've been working, I mean, we didn't really hear of any COVID cases or whatever. And just this week, there was 4 people that were kicked out of the job site because of COVID. And they were keeping it quiet, which was kind of upsetting, because it's like, dude, that's, 1 case is too much. So now that was 4, I believe, Wednesday. And today there was 1 more. And then I just got a call tonight. They're like, okay, we should have done it. Like, we should have done this a long time ago, but we can't come back to work until the 11th. And it's crazy to me, because, like, who knows how long these 4, were sick, and we were all walking around. I mean, we're all wearing masks. There's like an assigned guy walking around with Clorox wipes, who's wiping everything where any kind of any like bathrooms, handrails. But it's just, the company decided, we just sent those 4 home and we'll just keep the shit going because shit's got to get done. That's all falls into their responsibility. Where like whoever was in charge should have made that call. Like, one case, everybody get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, they probably did make that call to keep it quiet because it seems like a lot of places are doing that.
Yeah, and I actually today on the 5th case I actually spilled the beans myself. Fuck it, I overheard it and I told my boss.
So
this is one of those times where like snitching is okay.
Fuck yeah, especially with a pandemic like this. Nah, fuck that, man. I told.
It's not even snitching; it's doing the right thing at that point.
Yeah, snitch. Yeah, no, definitely.
So the next quote,
saving lives.
Exactly.
So the next quote I want to read from the movie is there's a part where he says, Noam Chomsky says, right after the Iran-Contra hearing. So Iran-Contra, I guess it was Iran had captured some Americans, and what's his name? The Ronald Reagan sold weapons to Iran in order to get to release the hostages,
right?
And use that money to fund a war in Nicaragua to overthrow the government there.
Yeah.
Don't forget about the drug trade.
Yep.
So used to fund Nicaragua.
Okay.
Well, they use the Contras to pass some of the shit, right?
Yeah. So the quote is, right after the Iran-Contra hearings, a lot of good reporters understood this things are gonna be a little more open for a couple of months. He says they rammed stories that they knew they couldn't talk about before. And then somebody else says the same as after Watergate, and he says then it closes up again, right? So what he's saying is that when there's something like that happening, people are more receptive to hearing about how messed up the world is, but only for a short amount of time. I think that we're living in that right now. I think with all this protesting, with people not being able to work and things like that, I think we're at that moment where we're going to hear a lot of how the world really works. But this tells us that that's a very limited time. It won't be like that forever, right? Probably by this time next year, we're going to be right back to most people thinking that everything's okay.
There's one thing that I was actually just watching something today, and it was a conversation between, whatever. But it's crazy that like when you really look into what's going on all over the world. A perfect example of this, I something I didn't know about. Obviously, slavery still exists, right? That's known. But I heard something that got into details of it, of how like China and some like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, those countries are like practicing slavery the way it was practiced back in the day with Africa. They go in Africa and they take young children, kids, and then they bring them to these camps where they're cramming like 30-something into a room, and they're the ones working in the butlers, the cleaning, and it's stuff like that. You really got to look for it to find it.
Yeah,
it's not going to be reported. A perfect example what you were just talking about also is, have you guys seen the movie Kill the Messenger?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well that goes into a reporter who from San Jose, the San Jose Mercury, who went and he was going to do a story about the crack epidemic back in the 80s. So you're talking about I believe this was during Ronald Reagan's time.
Mm-hmm.
And he discovered that the CIA was involved in the whole crack epidemic, which the Contras, from what it's been a while since I watched it, but he went to Mexico, and I believe he also went to Nicaragua, and he discovered that the CIA was heavily involved in bringing over the cocaine that eventually got cooked up to become crack.
Yeah.
and that guy died of suicide by 2 bullet holes in his head.
Yeah.
But it's just those stories that you don't find.
How do you
And
shoot yourself twice in the head?
Exactly, and it's ruled as a suicide.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
shot one.
highly recommend that. That'd be a good one we could talk about eventually. But it all falls into basically what we're talking about, because it's these stories that don't get talked about in we'll talk about Kardashians before we
Right?
talk about some shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
in the news. And one thing, this guy that I used to, was an old friend of mine who, his parents and his family members in Mexico were deeply involved in news. They worked in some, I forgot what now, maybe Univision. Whenever there's a big scandal, a big story, it's usually to cover something bigger up.
Yeah, everybody's been saying that. Whenever that happens, I'm like, okay, what is it? What is it? I can't find it, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because it's either something being passed,
Yeah.
or some.
The one that I was able to make the connection was this whole with Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith.
Yes.
Like that was pretty obvious. Like, we know what's going on.
Right, and wasn't that an old story already?
Right.
Wasn't that so? Yeah, it's easy to. I mean, especially if that's your. I think from what I got from this, which is it's something that I, in a way, I already know, but this describes it perfectly. Don't depend on the the CNNs and the CNBCs to give you the news. I mean, yes, it's a good source of news, but just don't depend it as your primary and only source of news.
Right. So the next quote I want to move on to is he says, Noam Chomsky says in the movie, "The point is you have to work. That's why the propaganda system is so successful. Very few people are going to have time, the energy, or the commitment to carry out the constant battle." And later on in the movie, he says another thing. Towards the end, he says, "The beauty of our system is that it isolates everybody. Each person is sitting alone in front of the tube. Nowadays, it's phone, tablet, laptop." He says, "It's very hard to have ideas under those circumstances. You can't fight the world alone. The way you do is through organization." So, as somebody who's been unemployed most of my life, like, it's very clear. For me, it was like, I want to be creative and make movies. It's like, it's harder. It's harder if you work 8 hours, you commute, another 2 hours, and you get home and you're tired. And all you really want to do is, watch the Kardashians or whatever, play some video games. And with the economy getting worse and worse, like, you have to work even more hours. I mean, a lot of people don't work 40 hours. They're working 50, 60, or, above that. Even more.
Last year, we were working 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Were you able to catch that, Joaquin?
Yeah, about people working ridiculous hours.
Yeah, and not being able to pay attention to what's really happening.
That's something that I thought about the protests. More people protested, I think, over George Floyd than previous killings, and I think it's because so many people were out of work. They had the time to do it,
Right. Yeah.
Here's a thought that I had because of that. Yeah, that's one of the good things. That's one of the good. I don't want to say good things, but in a way, I'm glad that there was not that everyone had the time to be active for that. But I also thought, and it's just me being the guy that doesn't trust, Because I mean, of course, this was all. We heard about this story through the media, and who like of course it was everybody, but the majority of the people that were out protesting for this were colored people because we saw ourselves on the floor like as George Floyd, and during the pandemic, this comes out. We're all gonna be close. Like I was just thinking, like, did this in a way kind of happen on purpose because there is a pandemic and this is gonna force people to go out be.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You know what though? It wasn't mainly black people that were protesting. See that?
No, I'm not saying mainly. I'm saying it was everybody, but it was of course.
So this is what I saw, right? I would turn on CNN or any of those. I think all those channels are close together, and I would just watch them because I wanted to know how they were covering it. And the cameras were focusing on black people, but then there's this YouTube channel called Unicorn Riot, and they straight up just put the camera. They're not like editing. They're not presenting it for a 5-minute special. It's like they just sit the camera there and let you see everything. And it was mostly white people, dude. It was like mostly white people in their 20s and early 30s.
Right? No, I didn't. Okay, yeah, that's I didn't. Of course, it sounds worse when I said it like that. I'm just talking about the people that would go and protest for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just happened that they are all the ones out there, and with the pandemic going on,
Yeah.
I don't know. From their point of view, I'm wondering if they saw that as an opportunity, because I'm sure after those protests, the COVID cases got even higher, and look at where we're at now. It's even higher than it was. It's going up. I'm seeing it closer and closer, man. Like I
think that where it's going higher is not the same as where the protests are happening. Right.
I mean, I would have to see I would have to see the data on that, but I totally went off the rails there. Just had to get that thought out.
So, or we need organization, right? That's one of the things that Noam Chomsky says. But like the scary thing is that organization through social media, we know that it's monitored, right?
Yeah.
Facebook keeps getting into trouble for things like that. I was trying to do some watching some news reports on the Arab Spring, and specifically I think it's the Egyptian revolution. And so they start protesting against I think it's a dictator, and they're getting all these protests done through social media. And so what the government does.
You talking about recently?
No, this was like 10 years ago. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah. Like I think like maybe 2011 or something like that. 12.
Yeah, okay.
And so then the government bans the leaders' social media. But what it did is it made the protest even bigger and more powerful because they were communicating person to person, as opposed to through social media where they could be monitored. So the next quote is he says, how do we make media more democratic? He says, how do we make corporations more democratic? And he says through social revolution, which I think it's what's happening right now with the protests. And then the demand to defund police. I would love to be optimistic and think that we're going to get real change. I'm not so convinced. I don't know what you guys think. I think Joaquin, I've heard you say you're a little bit more positive on the situation.
Positive on the situation?
Yeah, you said that you're more hopeful that there will be actual change through the protests.
I mean, what can one do other than hope?
Right.
hope and act if you can. Definitely.
That's a hard one, man. I mean, because look at this. I think the closest the closest it's ever gotten, and I think it probably had the most impact was the '60s. The '60s was a very, you know, that seemed like that. I mean, what they were pushing for, it didn't happen all the way, but goddamn, it made a huge impact, and it did make a lot of
No, no,
change.
no. Noam Chomsky in Manufacturing Consent brings up how social movements start, and not how they start, but he brought up, as far as their time frame. He said, okay, so the feminist movement was sort of barely starting in the 60s. The environmentalist movement was sort of barely starting in the 70s, and other movements, civil rights, all that. But now it's, and those things were barely a part of the conversation. They were considered to be something that was impolite to mention, even on the news. And now it's become a part of the conversation. And he didn't follow this. I was hoping he was going to follow this up with like a more direct analysis of that, but I'll give that here. I have read that most people tend to be rooted. Most people, when they're adults, tend to be rooted into their beliefs. No matter what evidence or emotional appeal you make, they are, whatever persuasion of thought at that point in time, unmovable. However, the key to changing society isn't necessarily to change the hearts of people who are already running things. It is to educate the youth. So you have a bunch of young people growing up and learning about the environment, or learning about, it's the idea that, it's totally fine to sit next to this African American kid at my lunch counter, even though I'm not African American myself. They're taught this through media, through school. As an example, as far as the environmentalist situation, I mean, I think all of us here,
that in itself is a success to what they did in the '60s, like you just said.
Right. But it takes generations of teaching the young. Yeah. You know what I mean? How to, It's sort of like the young are more receptive to this new stuff. So it's like you have people like us who've grown up. Like I remember watching Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's a whole generation of people watching that who are like, maybe I should throw my garbage in the garbage can instead of just on the ground like a jerk.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
And otherwise, the green-haired freak is going to come and drop me off the side of a building or something.
Yeah. You know what was crazy to me? Okay, this is something that I didn't realize till I was older, how privileged I was. People my age from other parts of California, not that far, just other parts of California, they told me they didn't learn about Malcolm X, or the Black Panthers, or the Brown Beret and the Chicano movement in high school, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, you didn't? Like, no, never.
You did?
Yeah, yeah. You're another one of those. I learned about all that in elementary, dude. I learned about the Mexican Revolution from my dad, which I always, whatever. And like when it comes to, like the Emmett Till story, I learned all about all of that in elementary and middle school, high school, like all throughout, and I met people my age that didn't learn about that till after high school in some movie or whatever. I still haven't seen the Spike Lee Malcolm X movie because I wrote so many papers on Malcolm X. But that's just an example of, like you said, teaching the youth that is very important, man.
You know what I learned in film school was that kids' movies tend to be a lot more progressive. Adult movies, the villains are either represent women or they represent immigrants or, things like that.
Yeah, propaganda.
Yeah, whereas kids' movies tend to be a lot more progressive. I didn't pick it up, but what's that movie where Zootopia? It's all about, it's about racism.
Yeah, that's what I didn't realize that. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I was
watching a horror movie. It was a CGI movie for kids, and it's the ghosts are not bad or the monsters aren't bad. They're given kind of a humanity.
Which movie again?
I don't remember. It was some scary movie for kids.
Okay.
Something recent. I don't know.
Sound like Monsters Inc.
Maybe, yeah, that might be it. No. That it's a newer one, more recent one.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's.
Is it a Japanese anime?
No. It's a like not Pixar, but American.
Disney. Oh,
Maybe not Disney. Maybe, I don't know. The kids were watching it. I just happened to like sit down for a little bit, but I was able to catch.
Okay. Well, that's that. Like Pixar films, man. They're like. I mean, I'm of course the and I've heard what's his name Archimedes say this about like Dragon Ball Z, like it the importance of discipline. Like that's what he says that show was all about to him.
Yeah, to me too. Yeah, I agree.
I never seen so. All right, but it's when it comes to like for right now. These a lot of these kids have access to, and a lot of them, especially because the youth are really the forefront for this whole movement right now. There's a lot of youth involved. They have that energy that those, for the most part, from what I've seen, they have that energy that those teens in the '60s had, but then they have access to like social media, and that to me is a big fucking that's a huge win. Like imagine if those kids from the 60s had access to social media the way we do.
I will forever be impressed by the K-pop stans. You guys know about that?
No, well I know what K-pop is, but
where they hacked the feed to redirect some. Yes.
What did they do?
So the thing I'm impressed about was that they when at one of Trump's rallies, you had to RSVP.
Oh,
and so RSVP'd, and that's why it was empty.
And they bought all the tickets, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's insane, dude. Like
that reminds me of something. That reminds me of something 50 Cent did to Ja Rule 2 years ago.
Right.
Ja Rule went to go perform somewhere, and then he bought out all the tickets.
The front row, right?
Perform in front of an empty. Huh?
Was it? Oh, it was the whole thing. I thought it was just the front row.
It was the whole thing.
Yeah.
Ja Rule had to perform in front of an empty stadium.
Dang, that's fucked up.
That's petty.
Hey,
I mean, he got his money though.
Hey, yeah, exactly. That fuck it. I don't give a fuck. I would have just chilled and been on my phone on the. Gives a fuck. You know what? And it makes sense. It makes sense why that guy got shot 9 times. You see this shit every day. All the fucking trolling he does. Like, yeah, I bet somebody did shoot you 9 times, motherfucker. Like this. Damn.
No. He wasn't doing that till after he got shot. That's what. That's what made him into a troll.
Hell,
I don't know. I've known trolls. You don't turn into a troll.
He lost heck of weight.
Was that?
He became an.
Yeah, I think he's always been like that, man. Like he didn't have the money that he had before, and like now it's doubled.
I've always wanted to be a troll.
You don't just shoot somebody 9 times for some. Yeah, no.
I mean, they shot him because he was exposing the illegal business of an old school Queens gangster.
He snitched. That's what I
heard. And he did it on a song. And you could argue that the song was fair game, but I guess Supreme didn't like that, so he handed the hit down. Supposedly it went through Ja Rule's management, Irv Gotti, and they paid a guy to go shoot him 9 times, and then he survived. And
wasn't it a rapper?
It backfired on him because that's what's ironically that's what skyrocketed his career.
Wasn't it a guy? The guy that shot him, wasn't it a rapper?
No, he was a street guy. Some dude named Hamo.
It was a long time ago. I watched this documentary about their beef, and never mind. Anyway, we're going off. So
the next quote I wanna mention is so he says, economic institutions ought to be run democratically by the participants, by the community, and this is something I've been learning about recently. Right? Every American loves democracy. We love democracy.
They love saying that they love democracy.
No, you know what? This one I actually believe. Like, you could criticize American society for a lot of things, but personally, I believe that we do love democracy, but we have democracy in our government structure, but we don't have democracy in our economic structure, right?
That's true. Well, okay, so you could argue that to a degree there is what they call the free market, meaning, I mean, people would argue that that is a form of democracy. Like, and on a small scale, you have Pepsi and Coke. Well, in this example, more people, let's say everybody shifted over to Pepsi for like 6 months. Coke goes out of business. We voted for Pepsi over Coke, but that's as far as it goes. I'm pretty sure that's not what you mean when you say sort of economics directed by democracy, but that's kind of what I think an establishment person would argue.
Yeah. So in other lectures that Noam Chomsky gives, he talks about how this what did you call it? Free market is not really a free market. It's just kind of the freedom for the elites to exploit everybody else. What was I going to say? Because it seems like that's why our politics are screwed up, because they're run by big money, right?
Someone said that the reason, what was the quote? The fact that some of these companies, a lot of these companies,
Noam also in the documentary does mention that there are a few communities that run under this sort of economically democratic system. He didn't go in at length, I don't think, in the documentary as to describing how they work. It was very brief, but I was intrigued. I was like, tell me more.
What were you saying, JD?
So this is something I was listening to, is that the fact that a lot of these big corporations are outsourcing their shit overseas for, like, shit labor. I mean, not shit labor, but like low wages. That in itself is proof that they don't like free market.
Right.
Like true capitalism scares those guys.
Right. Absolutely. So I wanna touch on the common enemy, right? Communism. It was a horrible word even when I was in high school, and it kind of still is. I hear it less and less, but I remember it was normal for people kids to joke around like "goddamn commie," things like that, right? I don't hear kids say that anymore, but
can I share something really funny?
Yeah.
Just when you're talking about that, you said you watched the Cuba Libre documentary.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you remember. You say you didn't finish it, but there was this.
I finished it yesterday.
Okay, well, do you remember the part where Fidel was asking his crew who was going to be the economist of the country?
Yeah.
And what was it? Che Guevara said, "I'm gonna." I guess he heard in Spanish the word is
communist.
Yeah,
he's like, "I'm a communist."
I'm a communist. He meant like communist, economist. He mixed up the word, and then like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're in. So he became the economist. What he meant to say, communist.
Yeah.
So they made him the economist. Anyways, I just wanted to put that out.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to this other guy. His name is Richard Wolff. Have you guys heard about him?
I've heard of him.
So he's an economist, right? And he very much wants to see socialism, more prominent. And so he talks about how, and Noam Chomsky says this too, where you have the Bolshevik Revolution, and I think they're like, okay, communism for everybody, socialism for everybody, Marxism for everybody. Which I guess to lay the foundation, it took a really long time. And after so much time, people don't really, we don't have a lot of patience, and so they hadn't achieved communism yet. But Stalin, seeing that people were upset, was like, okay, we're done. This is communism. But really, the only thing they had was that the state controlled all the resources, as opposed to what we have here, where all the resources are controlled privately, right? But we know that the Soviets had a lot of poverty. We know that Cuba had it, and so it wasn't, according to Richard Wolff, it was not true socialism. Even though I think they did have a lot of programs that helped people, but there were still a lot of issues. So Noam Chomsky says that the Soviet Union wrongfully called its system communist. And then the U.S., who was the enemy of the Soviet Union, also wrongfully called the Soviet Union communist and turned the word communist into basically a bad word.
Commie scum.
Right. So Richard Wolff talks about what's called the co-op, the work co-op. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically it's workers own the business,
right?
Which is not what we have here.
We have a few in Berkeley, don't we?
Oh, do we?
Like I've seen a few workers co-op places like the cheese board factory.
Yeah.
Some businesses that are supposedly owned by the people that work for the business.
A lot actually are up and coming. Like a lot of the breweries. That's an example. I mean, that's.
I think it's a smaller scale than what you're probably talking about. But
yeah. Right.
And so a lot of issues with our economy, I think, can be directly pointed at our current capitalist system, right? You have the people at the top controlling it, and so if they see that they can save money by moving to China, they're going to do it, and then those of us working at the bottom, like, good luck, right? We don't have a say. With the whole Richard Wolff talks about how that could have saved the pandemic, right? Where because it's not profitable to store supplies to fight a pandemic, they didn't do it. A lot of our healthcare, I think, is privatized. Were it not privatized, maybe we wouldn't have had that issue. So I watched this documentary, I think just yesterday, about there's I think the city is called Mondragon in Spain, and it's a
two documentaries in one day. Jesus Christ,
dude! I've been nonstop. I was telling Phil it's exhausting. So the city has 24,000 people, and I think most of the population works in these co-ops. And it's a very diversified co-op, right? They manufacture, I think, appliances, but they also have other departments, and they have a financing department or a bank, its own, which is part of its own structure, also a co-op. They have a research and development department and other stuff that I didn't understand. But what they talk about is that if it was just one department, like you said, what were some of those businesses that you guys, like a brewery? A brewery can easily go under regardless of whether it's a co-op or not. But because this one diversified, because it's such a big, it's many different companies working together, they were able to survive the crash of 2008. So what happens is, some of the departments were making less money, so they simply just moved a lot of those workers over to the departments that were still surviving. I would love to see that. I would love to see that here during my lifetime.
I mean, yeah, because I know other countries. Well, do you think we have it better during a pandemic here than other countries do?
Absolutely not. I think we're the worst one in the world.
Because I talked to someone who is in. Well, I mean, it depends on the country. Because I know some countries. They're not working and they're getting like what is it? Do you know what Canada's doing?
Yeah, they're getting paychecks.
They're getting paychecks. Yeah. I mean they're well off. I know someone who is in the Philippines and they're telling me. I'm sorry, not the Philippines. She's in damn it, where is it? Where Russell Simmons currently lives? I forgot. Anyways, somewhere in Asia.
Okay.
And they're not, you gotta have money just to go in to see a doctor. They won't even see you without, just like Mexico,
Yeah.
You gotta have money, like just to set up the appointment.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, the fact that they don't have a system in place for that, like right now, they're still debating, or did they finalize anything for the second stimulus?
No, I because they had all taken a long weekend break, but I don't know what. I don't know where we're at.
They're going on vacation. We'll talk about this. That's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be comparing ourselves to any countries that are not, the richest countries in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we are the richest country, according, to us.
Yeah. So I was watching another lecture, and Noam Chomsky talks about how nobody's talking about this work co-op city. If people were talking about it, all of us would be curious, wouldn't we? I mean, I don't know. I've been broke. I've been broke this whole time, and I could just join the race, but like, I don't know. I feel like things shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't be in a rat race. I don't know.
Well, in the film, isn't there something about this country next to Indonesia? Was it Indonesia? Where the way they lived, they didn't want anyone knowing about that, so they helped. What was it, Indonesia? Or was it Cambodia?
Where the genocide happened?
Yeah,
Cambodia.
That's like you said, that's why we wouldn't be able to hear about them, because the way their lifestyle, like it's anything that's super progressive or that's ahead of its, that's not what we have. It's a threat. They don't want you seeing, they would put forward effort to dismantle that.
Yeah.
Just so you don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So another quote in the movie, he says, sane, sensible, reasonable people observing injustices is scarier than a Hitler. We like to blame Trump right now. He says, that was what I added. He says, these people would not operate, meaning, a dictator, would not operate were it not for apathy. He says, sane, reasonable, and tolerant people share a serious burden of guilt. They easily throw on the shoulders of others who seem extreme and violent. And we know we love to do that, right? We love to talk about dictators from other countries. We love to talk about, like I said, Trump. We love to, but at the end of the day, and this is a hard pill to swallow. At the end of the day, all of us could easily end that, right? Not easily.
A lot of blood will be shed.
I don't agree with that. I think that in this society we can do it. I don't know. I mean, it's never been done, so maybe not. But I don't know.
I'm sorry. That what would be done again?
If we all knew what was going on, and most people would want to end all these injustices, but we don't.
It's like if you show everyone. Perfect example is the pandemic. Just please put on your mask to save lives and stay home. And there's. And then no, I refuse. No, I think the same thing would happen. If you like you said, if you educate it, there's always going to be those that are nah. What you put it out there, you put out the truth. I mean, look at all the things that Trump said before he got elected. That's just an example, and he still got elected.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it takes a lot to move people, man.
Yeah.
You got to really be fucking angry. I think like something like a nuke, or I don't want to say it like that.
Didn't do it.
I mean, even that didn't do it.
Yeah, I think it's the anniversary of Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
So
don't think any. I don't think there. I don't think.
go ahead.
I don't think there's like a right or wrong answer, because even if something did like catastrophic happen, I think we would turn on ourselves first before we looked at the problem.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So I guess we'll use the the rest of the time to what did you guys think? Anything that you haven't said. What did you guys think about the documentary?
Overall, I liked it.
Yeah.
What I didn't like about it is just that there was, to a certain extent, there was really nothing new that I got from it. It was just someone's interpretation, and it just super detailed.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. But overall, I liked it. It's just certain things I didn't like about it. That was, but goddamn, those details, the way he describes it.
He's really good at it, right?
He's really good at it. Yeah. Which I'm glad he's still alive, because he's still. I've seen some of his recent stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, the way the first time I saw an interview with him, it was Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine, which I don't know if you know.
I saw it recently.
You saw that interview?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard of Noam Chomsky, and he's one of those dudes that like his stance hasn't changed. He's like immovable. Like he's on the truth, and those people that are on the truth, you can't fuck with them, man. Like whatever their stance is, it stays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you,
with the truth.
Joaquin? What in general, what did you think of the documentary?
I thought it was very good. It's always refreshing to see a well-constructed critique on media and media representation. And I thought the visuals paired with the documentary, I mean, obviously it's a film's visual piece. I thought the documentary was done well as far as visual aesthetics and pacing. I wish that they had focused a bit more on the solutions that Chomsky presented, because a lot of it was sort of like, all right, the problem is that the media is masking things and we're not told the truth and we don't have access or freedoms to this, and just like a little bit more on the steps we can take to. But ironically, it felt like, yes, this documentary came out, but then I had the thought, wait, what if whoever made this documentary didn't want the solutions to come out, huh? Right? Masking it. So it looks like we're hearing everything Chomsky have to say, but really we're not. Proof that the documentary proved his point.
That's kind of like that reminds me of what Joaquin just said. It's like when you say, I'm going to lose weight to someone else, like you say that to someone else, you're like, yeah, but then you never do it because you just hearing it is good enough. And that's kind of the taste I got from that.
So I've gotten a couple
I agree.
I've gotten a couple of people send me conspiracy theory documentaries, and because I respect them, I watch them, but then I share my opinions on them. And what I like about this documentary is that it makes it super simple, like how to look into things like that. Like, for example, flat Earth, right? You've heard about the flat earthers. They say that the government is lying to you, that things like that, right? So, but Chomsky says the same thing. The government is lying to you, but when you look at why, it's usually you just follow the money. And with something like flat Earth, it's a lot harder to do that. The other thing that I think is going on right now, and I know very little of it, but I suspect that it's one of these conspiracy theories, is the whole Pizzagate and what's it called, the pedophile ring, that all these celebrities are all pedophiles, and you guys have heard of that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
With the Wayfair
Epstein
now.
didn't kill himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The Wayfair thing now going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Can I say something about that
please.
though? Like, I think that there's a lot of, because when I watch something like this, as opposed to watching whatever, like an alien documentary about whatever conspiracy theory, this you can't really. For me personally, you can't really classify this as conspiracy.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's in a form of that, but like this is dealing with documented real stuff,
right?
That's proven. And when you lump it in with like UFOs, and I'm not saying that the Pizzagate shit isn't real, but when you throw that in there with some other stuff that's weird, to where it's like when you lump this together with that, it kind of discredits everything this is got right there. When you just label this as a conspiracy documentary, it
And I'm not saying that elites aren't molesting kids. I'm sure there's plenty of elites
definitely
doing
that's yeah, no,
my issue with the movement is that I think it's claiming that if you put all these pedophiles in jail, then the world will be better.
Because there's fucking everyday regular people.
I mean, kids would be safer.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think
there's like regular people doing this shit too. Like it's not just those celebrities.
Right.
There's a lot of people, their uncle, whatever.
No, I understand that. I mean, you have to. My point is that for everyone you lock up, there's at least one kid that's a bit safer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one
definitely.
pedophile less. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no. When it comes to like calling this conspiracy, because there are people that will call this just conspiracy theory bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
and that totally discredits the truth in it, which sucks because like stuff like this or the JFK assassination or stuff like that. When you lump it in with the bullshit like the flat Earth, which I don't know, I don't really like to get into that because there's a lot of like I'm not a big fan of his, but Joe Rogan says is when you there's a lot of credible and real conspiracies that we could talk about, and when you talk about other stuff that's kind of bullshit, like who gives a fuck whether Bigfoot exists or not?
Right. Not gonna make the world better if we find it.
Also, the flat Earth thing, like who gives a fuck? Like, I mean, what? I don't know. It for me personally, I don't give a shit whether it's flat or not. How the fuck does that affect you? Like, you know? So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there because of that.
So another thing I want to say is, and I noticed this when Bush was president, like, living in California, everybody wasn't happy with Bush, and now everybody is unhappy with Trump. And you would hear a lot of bad shit that's going on. What happens when a Democratic president gets into office?
I've said this before, man, and like it feels like a good cop, bad cop thing.
Yeah,
it's like good cop, bad cop. Like, all right, you like we're playing hot potato, like social hot potato. It's like 4 years of this, 4 years of that, 8 years of this, 8 years of that. I'm not, and that's what it feels like, and that's kind of what I felt with the DACA thing, like in Obama. The DACA, that's great, which was kind of sketchy to me back then. It's like, okay, they're playing good cop right now. Like, the good cop comes in, look, just tell us everything you know, and we'll, whatever, we'll blame it on your parents. Oh, okay. And then the bad cop comes in, you're guilty too, motherfucker. And we know where you live, and that's what they did to some of these kids. We know where you live. You're out of here. Yeah. I don't know. When the Titanic was sinking, it wasn't the worst thing to the fucking seafood, the live seafood they had in tanks.
Yeah. There was a few other things I wanted to touch on, but if we keep going, I think it'll go on forever. So if there's anything else you guys want to say, we'll do that.
We could do this again for another film, man. But I enjoyed watching this. I recommend it. I highly recommend it. I give it a 8.5 out of 10.
I've been recommending it to people. I don't know if anybody other than you guys have watched it.
I recommended it to my brother.
Okay.
He had already seen it.
Did you have hard time? Any? Were there any parts that you had a hard time following?
Joaquin?
No, actually, it was very digestible.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, yeah. That's good.
And it's also interesting to watch something like this because a lot of the stuff they talk about back then, it just lets you know where the world is as far as progress goes. Like, shit, they were struggling with that there.
Right.
Like, not if only they knew. Because what was this pre 9/11?
It was 1990.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look at how much the world changed after 9/11.
But also, every single issue in that movie is still relevant, right?
By the way, we should do a 9/11 episode. I think that should be interesting to release during 9/11 for us.
So I actually want to read his book on 9/11. Yeah. So
okay,
give me some time, but I'm down.
Yeah, because I mean that fucking day, along with like the Kennedy assassination, like that's been those have been drastically changed the world, dude.
Yeah.
And one of them we were allowed to see it. I'm sure we all remember what we were at when we found out.
How old were you?
But anyway,
JD?
I was 11. No. Yes, 11.
And Joaquin, you were a freshman?
Fresh.
During 9/11? 9/11?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, I was a freshman, yeah.
Okay, and I believe Phil is 1 year younger than me. Okay, well, yeah, unless you guys have more to say, I think we can end it there.
8.5 out of 10 from me. What about you, JX?
I'm definitely gonna give it a solid
10.
solid. Yeah, I can't even give a different score than that. 8.5 out of 10. As far as the documentary on YouTube, actually, I give that a 9. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Considering
I'll give it a 9
on YouTube.
too. I'll give it a 9 too. I didn't do 10 because some of the stuff was like, not that it was not a good film. It's just like, damn, you walk out of the film experience like bummed out. But that's the truth. The truth is, it's not meant to be enjoyed.
For me, it blew my mind. I'm realizing how sheltered I've been my whole life. It blew my mind completely. So some things I did know,
or naive.
I don't know if I was naive because I think I've always been kind of like. I think it's self-righteous. A lot of my friends say that it's a bit like pretentious. So I've always had the attitude where like I want to know this stuff and I want to share it and but a lot of it I didn't know. It's been very recent actually. After college, it's where I've started to kind of wake up to the things that are going on.
God damn it, man! You didn't learn this in college. I'm just kidding.
No. College was the beginning of it.
I'm kidding. Yeah, man. It definitely. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that I watch a lot of stuff. Not necessarily on this and other stuff too, but there's nothing when something that you already know is introduced in a different more clear way, Yeah. And that's what I appreciated about this. Yeah. It's like remixing a good song into a better song. It's like the I Got 5 on It Bay Area remix. It's like something good and you turn it into great. So that's my whole take on this. All right. Thank you guys for listening. That's been the Voice Party. We are out.